Through the chair, I would have to verify that. I'm sorry, I don't have that information here.
But if I'm correct, there was a major official plan amendment that took all the city's lands from Shepherd Avenue right down to all the lands in between the Allen Road and Wilson Heights Boulevard. And if I am correct, and maybe Mr. Livy might know the answer to this, but am I not correct that this is part of it? It's been through public meetings, public consultations, the reuse of the land designated for office use and all that.
I think staff answered he'd have to check that, so he doesn't know at current time.
Mr. Livy's just here. Would you know of, and sorry that you're just jumping into this, Mr. Livy, but we're talking about the parking lot on Shepherd Avenue near the subway station, and I was just asking if I'm correct in assuming that that lot was part of the comprehensive official plan amendments for the lands up in that area.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I can't tell you. I would imagine it would be, but I don't know for sure.
All right.
And the last thing is, does anyone know what the net revenue is for the TTC on the lot? Because gross revenue isn't net revenue.
I don't have those numbers to hand, so I can follow up after the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, do we have speakers? Councillor Pasternak. Anybody else?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I do have a few motions, if we could put them on the screen. I think in context, it's important to realize that most of the decisions regarding commuter parking were made in 2009. And I think it's fair to say that most of the people in this room were either not here at the city at all or were in a different capacity and therefore can't speak directly to decisions made at that time. But those were the decisions made at the time, but times have changed. And our whole commuter and transit network has changed, congestion has changed, the population has changed. So it's time for a sober second look at what was done back in 2009, when clearly there was a different view of the inner suburbs and the necessity for people to go from their homes to drop their kids off at school and then to potentially drop a spouse off at work and go to a commuter parking lot, leave the car there for the day and take the subway downtown. These are in fact our most loyal customers. They have the option of driving downtown, and yet they do not. They leave it at the parking lot. They do not bring it into the inner core of the city, and that's exactly what we want. There is a trend or a feeling that we're replacing almost all the spots that are being shrunken at the Wilson Station, at the Shepherd West Station, formerly Downsview Station. But when you look at where those spots are being placed, it is way up the grid. It is up at Finch, at Steeles, at Vaughan. People who live in around Wilson Avenue or Shepherd are not going to drive up to Finch or Steeles or Vaughan to park and then take the subway down. As a matter of fact, that's the last thing we want them to do. We don't want them driving long distances with their cars, congesting Allen Road, Dufferin, Wilson Heights. We want them to drive within the community, to have the convenience of leaving their car at a commuter parking lot at a reasonable price and then coming downtown. I am proposing that we set up an advisory body to have a sober second look at the decisions that were made in 2009. And at that time, there was a bit of an animosity towards the car. And I think it's time to revisit this issue and show respect for the inner suburban commuters. At the same time, I think there's an opportunity to work with Canada Lands at the Downsview Park Station. For those who are not familiar with it, that is a brand new station that will be opening at the end of the year at the corner of Shepherd and Chesswood. It intersects a new GO station. It will be a major transit hub, and for some reason there is zero commuter parking at that spot. At the same time, because of the questions raised about the Shepherd West Station commuter parking lot, it's important to defer indefinitely any decision to close it. I think the bottom line is that we want people to feel comfortable in their own neighborhoods. We want people to continue with the lifestyles that they enjoy, but we also want people to find a compromise with their car, to drive it within the local communities, to be able to leave it at a transit spot, to leave the kids, drop the kids off at school, and then drop a spouse off at work, and then come downtown on the subway. That's exactly what we want. These are our most loyal customers, and these are the ones that should be treated with respect. So we're just taking a sober second look at this whole policy initiative that was done at a time when very few of us were here, or very few of us were in the capacity we're in now. So I'd ask for your support on those motions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Councillor Shiner, you want to speak?
Yeah. And I really don't like to give my colleague a hard time, but I can't agree with him. The studies have always shown that 2/3 of the cars that are parking in these lots are from 905 outside of Toronto. That's been the consistent research that's been told to us. And when the subway extension opens up to 905, there'll be a lot more people in the line, and hopefully they won't be coming down. I'm sympathetic to the need to have some local parking for people in the area that might want to go to the subway. However, I've got 3 stops within my community. We've got a very few spaces. We actually have a lot over at Leslie and Shepherd, and it's not really well used. As soon as you put a fee on it, people didn't want to go to it. This particular land has already been identified for transfer to Build Toronto, but it means a lot more than that. Over the last many years, there has been an ongoing official plan review of the lands over there, and there's a comprehensive plan that is now in place to redevelop these properties, much as both office and housing, and I expect a fair amount of it will be affordable housing that can go into the site. I would imagine that from a perspective of representing the community, it's better to have a couple of hundred cars coming in. This 400 or 500 cars may come in a day in the morning, leave in the night, and have a development there because you have more cars from it, and it's more of an impact. But if you take away the lands that are next to Shepherd Avenue and the Allen Road, how are you going to develop the rest of the lands if you leave the parking lot there? It's not going to happen. There are opportunities, however, on some of the other lands on the west side of the Allen Road, working with Downsview Park, or another area that we haven't explored would be working with Bombardier on their lands along Wilson Avenue, because although you can't build on them, you might be able to put parking on them where the strip is. And I think those are reasonable ways to work at it, but I don't think you want to start to rewrite the playbook as to what you were going to do with these lands and take the major part where the office development's supposed to be, which are these lands here, and part of the official plan amendment that's in place. And the only reason the lands have been held up so long is the issue that had to be resolved between Bombardier's right on an old east-west airstrip that was in place, and I believe that's been recently or close to being resolved, so the lands can actually be developed. So what I would say is that I cannot support my colleagues' amendments. I would move the staff recommendations in the reports. I would receive this, but I also think that we can continue to work still between the New Toronto Realty Corporation, the local councillor, and some of the lands in the area to try and find some appropriate places for parking there, because I believe it's needed. But I also believe it's needed to serve our Toronto residents, not the 905 residents, and I think we can accomplish that once the new line opens up. And I can also tell you that there are no immediate plans to redevelop any of these lands. There's no sale, there's no purchaser, there's no approved plan going forward, so it will be a while until something actually happens on this particular parking lot. So I would suggest the most appropriate action is to support the staff recommendation and not my colleagues.
Thank you. I believe the mayor wants to speak.
Mr. Mr. Deputy Chair, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to vote down and vote against Councillor Pasternak's motion, mainly on the basis that I just don't think we can keep making these decisions over and over and over again on things like this and many other things. It's no wonder, you know, that we don't get a lot done sometimes in people's eyes because we keep revisiting these decisions and so on. But what I am going to move, and I just gave it to the clerk, so it'll take a minute, is I'm told it's actually a fairly quick matter to do a survey of the license plates, and I believe there's going to be nothing that has changed since the last time they surveyed. And I don't think we're in the business of maintaining or keeping open or building or parking lots for people from outside 416. You know, I mean, I know they're customers of the subway, so I guess in a way it's even worse because we're subsidizing them with no return back from the provincial government for their ride on the subway, but better they should take the subway from somewhere than to drive downtown. But, you know, this was part of what the road tolls discussion was about. You know, it was about the cost of roads and the cost of a lot of things that they don't contribute to from the 905. And so I would just like to ask staff to do that, and you know, I don't know what the results are going to be, but I'm willing to lay a bet they're going to be exactly the same as before, which is that the significant majority of those cars are from 905. And I just don't think we can continue, especially when we have other uses that have been identified for those lands, to provide parking for people from 905. You know, and especially now, I guess, when the subway actually goes to 905, the very subway we're talking about, then there's an opportunity, if they want to still ride the subway, to get on further up. So that's what I'm just proposing, is that there be, and I think the one in discussion in this particular item is Shepherd West, and they tell me, the staff do, that they can get that done in pretty short order. And then we can have those results reported back here, FYI. But I can see no reason why those commuter patterns will have changed in the intervening period, but maybe it will be satisfactory in the context of this debate to at least see that that's the case. So I would vote, I'll be voting against that, that amendment.
Mr. Chairman, is this a deferral? Or, Mr. Mayor, is this are you deferring it?
No, no, I just wanted to get the information, so I'm just asking for the information. Okay. I'm going to vote because I believe that it will be the same. And I mean, if it's something radically different, then we can talk about it again, but I don't think it will be. I'd be willing to bet money.
Very good. I believe Councillor Shiner has a question of you.
So I guess, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk, not no disrespect, the recommendation was to receive. If we adopt that, this report is gone. Yours is a good recommendation to get a survey. I'm trying to follow up, I guess, on what the question is. Is it to defer it to get a survey, or do we have to introduce that as a separate item to get that report in? Because I'm not quite sure what I'll be voting on.
I hadn't thought of that, you know, and quite frankly, I'm prepared to withdraw it and maybe just ask staff to do the survey, you know, because I'm sure if we just asked, they would do it, but I don't want to get us bogged down in extending the meeting. But I just thought it would be useful to get the data because I think it will help us with future discussions of this kind to say, look, we keep looking and we keep looking and we keep looking.
I'm fine with that. So if you're simply going to request them offline to do a survey and circulate it to us?
That's what I'll do.
That would be great.
I will do that. Thank you.
All right. So the clerk is the clerk is advising me that if we adopt your motion, Mr. Mayor, that we'd be striking out the motion to receive. So
I want to do the thing that's simplest and most expeditious, Mr. Chair.
Would be I think if you want us
ask
to move
staff
forward,
offline to do the study.
yes,
I'll do that.
yes.
I've really already done it, but I'll do it, and that's fine, and we can just then receive the matter.
So you're withdrawing your
Yes.
Okay, very good. Any further speakers? Councillor DeGiorgio.
I had some concerns, but I think, especially with the map that I saw here, there was a mislabeling. The Shepherd West station is actually the Downsview Park station, and the 415 William R. Allen Road is actually the Shepherd West lot. And there are, at the Shepherd West lot, 632 spots that are going to be closing in 2020. And I think that's what your motion was, Mr. Mayor, to look at that particular lot with respect to whatever cars are using that and whether they're originating from further north. I think there is the opportunity from the report that I read for shared parking to occur at Downsview Park, which is really just across the street from Chesswood. I can't imagine someone driving to that particular area and not having any place to park, unless you think they're going to park in that But anyway, so I had some concerns. I think there is shared parking availability at Downsview Park, and that was my major problem, so I'll support the recommendations as they are put forward.
Okay.
There is shared parking there, correct?
I'm just going to speak very, very briefly. So firstly, I want to talk about the process, and then I want to talk about the decision. So in terms of the process, it strikes me as really very odd that when we have stakeholder implications, the one group that we don't ask are the residents. I mean, something is wrong with this picture when we ask all the internal departments, TTC, Build Toronto, Canada Lands, the TPA, Cycle Toronto, and Walk TO, what they think about doing this. And there are two people we don't ask. One is the people who use the lot, and the second are the residents. In many cases, there's overlap. So I think fundamentally, fundamentally in this arrangement, we got it wrong, and I can completely understand the deputant coming down to City Hall, sitting here all day, expressing his concerns. So I think those are valid. The second piece is, though, however, we have to go to, the information that we have in front of us, and the information that we have in front of us is 2/3 of the people who use the lot are not from the local area. And we're going to get an update we're going to get these counts updated, which I think is a great idea. But fundamentally, the vast majority of the lot is not used by the people that live in the area. Only 1/3 of that lot is. So I think the decision's right. I'm happy to support the recommendations, but I think the process, we got it wrong. I mean, you're asking Walk TO, they're not going to be using the parking lot. I mean, I don't even know why you'd ask Walk TO when they're not going to not drive. They don't, they're not going to drive. Why are we asking Cycle TO about what they would like with the parking lot when, they are vastly opposed to cars? I mean, no, I'm saying I'm reading the report, right? We failed to ask the very people that are impacted by this, and I think that's where this thing went wrong. But I am going to support, because the data suggests that it actually is not being used by the community. Only 1/3. So we have motions. Do you want to put them up in the order that you see fit? All right. I'm not going to read it. Do you want a minute to read the motion? No? All those in favor? All those opposed? That does not carry. The next motion? The City Council requests the Toronto Transit Commission Board to request the Chief Executive Officer of the Toronto Transit Commission to explore options for early renewal or extension of the commuter parking lot lease between the Toronto Transit Commission and Yorkdale Shopping Centre Oxford Properties. All those in favor of that motion? All those opposed? That carries. That City Council requests the City Manager to report to Executive Committee at its meeting on November 29th on the discussions with the Canada Lands Corporation and the Toronto Parking Authority regarding a shared use opportunity at the Downsview Line subway and GO train stations on the Downsview Park Merchants Market and Farmers Market parking lot, including the option of elevated robotic parking systems. All those in favor of that motion? All those opposed? That carries. And the City Council requests the boards of the Toronto Transit Commission and Build Toronto to delay indefinitely the closure of the Shepherd West Station commuter parking lot. All those in favor of that motion? All those opposed? That fails. Item is amended? That's it? We're done. Councillor Ainsley said he'd be prepared to release item number 23.
Yes,
which
the
is
Toronto water budget item.
2017 capital budget. So what's that motion? Move the recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item 15, I think we have one deputant.
Correct.
So that is creating 600 affordable rental housing at the West Donlands and 27 Grosvenor, 26 Grenville site. And that is Catherine Holden. Thank you for coming and being so patient.
Am I speaking? I am. I have very bad vision, so I will have to get your help with telling me whether or not I have this in the right direction. Because
You do?
It looks good? Okay. I'm a member, I live in the TO Core section of downtown Toronto, and the site at 27 Grosvenor and 26 Grenville falls within the catchment area of the Bay Clover Hill Community Association, of which I am a member of the executive. We have sent a letter to you, the committee members, regarding 2 existing conditions on this land at 26 Grenville, 27 Grosvenor. And they are decisions that have been made over time at the extreme effort of the community. The one that is most relevant to this particular property is the definition of a pedestrian green loop in the TO Core area that actually straddles our community and the one on the other side of Yonge Street. This particular paper on the screen is showing the green space in TO Core, the sort of green ring, they call it, around downtown. I almost found it insulting because they're calling the Don Valley Parkway, the Toronto Islands, which are not accessible except by ferry, Garrison Creek, which is underground, and the railway lands to the north as their green loop. And at that park meeting for TO Core, it occurred to me that we had equally valid space in our community on a much smaller basis, that we could make our own little green loop that might be more valid for the people that actually live in our community. So we proposed that. The TO Core committee thought that encouraged us to do that. Councillor Wong Tam brought it forward at the November 2016 Toronto East York Community Council meeting, and our green loop was actually accepted and approved by TEYCC and then the City of Toronto. And you can see on the map there that it is site number 11. It is just cobbling together of POPs, privately owned public spaces, little tiny parks that might be 1/10 of an acre, the linear parks over the subway system, a couple of parks that we have managed through a lot of struggle to get through developments. And there were 3 outstanding properties that had land that we needed to complete this loop. One is the Courtyard Marriott Hotel, which you may know is under, it's in the application process right now. We do think we're going to get some land on the edge of that. One is a parking lot at 15 Wellesley Street East. We are going to get a little strip off the side of that. And the Morglands, which is what this is the 3rd piece of land that we need to get a little sliver off the side. And so that's what I'm asking you to consider today when you're talking about affordable land, affordable housing. We in our community all agree that we as a city need affordable housing. We need to really promote that kind of thinking. But we also need to promote green space downtown. We're probably the most green deficient part of the city. So that's what I'm asking you today to consider, that the pre-existing sort of lien on this property be given full attention, and that a 10-meter wide green space be allotted on the west side of this property for the pedestrian green loop that is part of the Toronto TO Core green parkland system. That's all I really need to say to you about that.
Well, Ms. Holden, thank you again, as the Deputy Mayor said, for your patience today and being here all day. And thank you for coming at a very early stage of this process, because I think there's time for your thoughts to be taken into account. I'll just see if there are any questions for you from members of the committee or members of City Council. But I think, in the hearing none, I can thank you very much again for your time and just tell you, you came very early in a process that we're very excited has happened. This is very good news for the city that there's going to be housing on that land. The province has made that land available. And so we hear what you're saying about green space and about some of the particulars, and we have the details of your submission. And so thank you for coming now. It's a good time to come at the beginning.
Yes, and the other factor is that there is a park which cannot be given any new net shadow, so that is the other consideration. But both of those are described in my letter.
Well, thank you again for your patience.
Thank you for your patience. After all, you've been here all day. I've only been here for a third of it.
That's what we're here to do. We're paid to be here and do that, and elected to do that, so we volunteered for it. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right. So, in your, pardon me. So, are there questions of staff by members of the committee or members of council on this? Are there those wishing to speak? Did you have a question, Councillor DeGiorgio?
Yeah, I'm just wondering to what extent the site plan, as it's proposed, permits the 10-meter on the west side that the deputant was referring to. Is that something that can easily be accommodated? Not sure who I'm asking that question of.
So through the mayor, we're currently, so these are provincial lands, and we're currently working with city planning on the development. The province will be going out for a call for proposals on the land, so we haven't finalized any design.
Okay, so it's early in the process then.
The report today is just pre-approving the financial incentives that the city could provide to support the affordable housing component.
All right, so approval in principle. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions of the deputy who's gone? Okay, so that's the questions of staff. Other questions of staff? Are there those wishing to speak on this matter? Okay, on that basis, then we can call the question. And we're talking here about 2715. Sorry. There we are. So there's a series of recommendations there. All those in favor? Opposed? Carry. Thank you. All right. Now your sheet of remaining. So are we to that item? Everything else has been dealt with then? No, we're going to keep doing that. I had held the next item, and it's 2724, and I have some questions of staff. But if there are no deputations on it, is there anybody else who wishes to ask questions of staff on this? Well, I'll just go ahead and do that then. My concern, and I'll direct the first question. Obviously, we've seen this go from 4.8 to 11.83 million, and I'm very supportive of the project, but I don't think we can go on having these projects that have these significant percentage cost increases without questioning that. And I wonder if somebody could just give me the Coles Notes version of what contributed to an increase from 4.8 to $11.83 million.
Mr. Mayor, I'll answer in part, and then I'll turn it over to staff for the details. This pedestrian bridge was first approved by council in 2011, and at that time was based on EA work with zero design work done. In the report in 2011, we indicated that there was a range of dollars that were involved, $4.2 to $6 million, plus a $1 to $2 million increase for potential landscaping, other design improvements. As we went through the detailed design, we hit two bigger problems. One, we had the Metrolinx RER program now adding a different elevation to the bridge because of the height that's required for the electrical installation, and we need to get Metrolinx's approval for this because they are the ones that actually give us authorization across the corridor. And then secondly, the cost of the elevators that were originally designed were underestimated, and when detailed design was done, we looked at that. We'd also looked at ramps and other configurations to try and mitigate those costs, but we're unable to do that. So we were back to elevators, They added another, well, I'll let Frank do that, plus you've had 6 years of escalation, which is approximately 15%.
How much was attributable to the change in the elevators then?
I'll let Frank answer that.
So through the design, through the enhanced architectural improvements, we're looking at a delta of approximately $1 to $1.5 million
Of additional cost?
of additional costs.
And is that attributable mainly, is that related at all to the increase in the height of the bridge because of Metrolinx's requirements?
Yes, that's correct. We increased the height by 3 meters, so it's another story, basically.
Was it also a contributing factor that we made the estimate of the cost of the elevators at the time based on, very limited design, or is that a lesser factor?
That's correct. That's also a contributing factor. It's not as much as the increase in height, 3 meters, but it is a contributing factor because we didn't have the enhanced architectural or design amenities flushed out.
And will this, for future projects of this kind, be addressed in part by the stage-gated process that we're now following with projects of this kind?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's precisely the point. Back in 2011, we weren't using a stage gate process, so we had zero design. We would have brought back under the current regime, we bring back to you with stage gate 3, which would be a 30% design. That would be the way that we would do that now, and you would have had a much better confidence in the number that we would have brought forward at that point.
Have we, since really all of the cost here is in some way related, or a big portion of the cost increase is related to Metrolinx's change of height requirements, have we been in touch with them to suggest to them, I'm using very light language, but to tell them that they should be paying up for part of the cost of this change because they changed their requirements between 2011 and now? Have we made any such request of them?
Mr. Mayor, specifically on this, we pushed back on the actual dimension, but we also have indicated our unhappiness and the additional costs it would bring on us. It's a much bigger conversation, obviously, with us and Metrolinx on the total number of bridges that will be impacted by the RER program. We're expecting them to foot the bill for all those changes, and they have, as a result, looked at some other technologies like the hydrogen technology as a way of obviating, which are going to be very substantial, billions of dollars of cost to put in RER because of the elevations that are going to require road changes and bridge changes.
Could you undertake just as part of, to give, because I've never seen a list of all those bridges, but, caused by, in effect, I'm saying something that is a good news story, GO, RER, expansion, and electrification. Could you get us a list of those, and including this one, because then I think it might form the basis of a broader, I'll call it a claim to them for financial assistance with this.
Mr. Mayor, we have that list, and yes, we can provide that.
Okay, well, that's fine. Those are my questions. Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to? Anybody else wanting to ask questions? Is there anybody that would like to speak? I will just speak then very briefly. Just to say, I just think this is one of our problems down here with respect to how people perceive what we're doing. And, if you listen to the explanation, it's a perfectly reasonable explanation, most of which is caused by a factor external to the City of Toronto. And when I do have a motion that is going to ask that this explanation be provided to the City Council, because right now if you look at the report, there's very little in there that explains the difference between 4.8 and $11 million, and I think that's when the taxpayers think that we've just sort of, I don't know what they think we're doing, but I think there actually is a reasonable explanation that the Deputy City Manager gave, and most of it has to do with Metrolinx, and I certainly want, when I see the full extent of the expense we might be put to on other bridges, including this one, want to claim from them that they should be contributing to the increase in cost that we're undertaking on a project that I support. And I will support it now, but I just think that we have to do better at, first of all, I think the stage-gated process that's been brought in under this administration is going to help us to have fewer of these instances in which we had a very low percentage of the design and therefore got a bad estimate or an inaccurate estimate, but that when it's something like this where a lot of it's externally caused by a decision of Metrolinx, that we have to be more aggressive in both explaining that to the public, but also trying to seek recompense from Metrolinx for the added expense. But I'm mostly just concerned that the public see transparently why the cost has gone from one amount to another. I will say, and this only makes me feel very, very slightly, mildly better, all of it will be covered by growth-related revenues, development charge funding. But those are public dollars, I mean, in every respect. I mean, they're money that otherwise could be put to something else. But this is a good project. It's just that I was very concerned, and I didn't think the report answered the questions for us, and more importantly, for the people who read these reports that we represent. So I'll stop there, and is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Okay. I have this motion then that asks for council for next week a breakdown so that you can have a full explanation in writing that Mr. Livy gave us just now and other staff, so that all council and all public can see it. So I'll call the question on the amendment first. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. On the item as amended, oh, it's just okay. That's it. Somehow in my Tuesday morning lackadaisical reading of the agenda, I missed two items as we went down as we went down the agenda earlier on today. And that one was another one that I held, and I think there's a motion on that. But it's the one to do with number 27.6, adjustments to 2 affordable housing loans to the YWCA of Greater Toronto. Are there anybody who wants to ask questions of staff on that other than myself? I don't really want to ask questions of staff. I just want to speak to it. Because again, it's one of those things I think people would shake their head. Anybody want to ask questions of staff? Anybody else wanting to speak? Okay, well, I will do it again, and I'll just start the clock. This is an instance, I think, if you've read the report, which I know you have, where, in a nutshell, and I have a motion here that is asking our our Chief Financial Officer and our Deputy City Manager, Cluster A, to have further discussions with the Province of Ontario with regard to the outstanding provincial and municipal loans to, again, something that is a project to be proud of. It's a project to be proud of. I took mayors from the other cities there to show them what we had done on Elm Street and what the YWCA had done with us and so on. But it did require, and I'm not quibbling with this, quite a bit of government assistance on the finances. And what you see in front of you now is a report that says, well, we might be able to start getting our loan repaid in 2034, 17 years from now, after the province has had its Infrastructure Ontario loan entirely repaid. And to me, I mean, I just shake my head in complete amazement at that. And so I would like to ask your concurrence in sending our staff back, and I'm sure they've had some discussions already, in fact, I know they have, and say, you know what, this is just not fair. This is just not appropriate. That we should be saying at least some of our loan should be getting paid back at the same time, so that our loan is at least diminishing, even if it's not 50-50. I would suggest that would be fair, but if it's some other number, that's fine. But the notion that we get zero until 2034, and they get their loan entirely repaid over that period, and then maybe at that time, depending on what's going on, our loan starts to get repaid, I don't think is fair. And so when I saw this, I just said that the staff explained what had gone on, and I just said, well, I would very much like them to go back and to advocate on our behalf that we have to get a better deal than this so that we can start paying our loan. That's money, if we got it paid back, we could put to other uses in the housing area. So that's all I have to say about it, and my motion, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Councillor Pasternak?
Yeah, I would just ask the question of if they default on the Infrastructure Ontario loan, could there be penalties or provisions that could push them right under, and then we lose everything?
I don't think it's a matter of of them defaulting. I'm not suggesting that. I think that what I'm suggesting here is there simply be a different repayment schedule, so we keep paying back the Infrastructure Ontario loan, but that the Government of Ontario, Infrastructure Ontario, actually agrees to have it paid back a bit more slowly so that we can start getting paid back over the same period of time. But I don't think there's any question that would cause a default, but that's obviously what would have to be discussed. I certainly have no intention of wanting to see a default take place here. That would defeat the purpose of having this very excellent housing. It really is an excellent housing project. Councillor Shiner?
I'll speak.
Is this you speaking or asking a question of me? Yes. Okay.
Mayor Tory, I support your motion. And in reading this and discussing it as well with my colleague, Councillor Barlow, the very disappointing part is that this money was supposed to come back and then we could use it for more affordable housing. It's two parts, $5.5 million towards the construction and $2 million for energy savings. Well, even if the energy savings aren't what we're expected, there's energy savings, and yet our loan isn't being paid back. That's not right. The capital costs out till another 17 years, over 20 years, on a loan at 0 interest is, I would believe, very difficult, because how do you treat others in that same manner when they ask for that? We've recently had sites in the city that have gone up for sale through Build Toronto, and some of those organizations had trouble finding the ability to buy the land, but they came back and restructured their offer when we worked with them, and they were able to purchase land to build affordable housing. We're working with them. This is $7.5 million deferred for over 20 years that cannot go in to other affordable housing units anywhere in the city, because another party, being another government, the Ontario government, has also loaned money through Infrastructure Ontario, $5.2 million, and their loan's getting repaid. And there's no guarantee at all in that loan that that money would have gone into affordable housing. I believe that the YWCA, who did a great job at fundraising for this project initially, because they raised millions of dollars, has to go back and try and find some more funds somehow to make this a little bit better for the taxpayers of Toronto and those people that need affordable housing. I don't think we can allow this money to sit out there and not even collect interest on it for another 17 years. And I don't know what to tell any other party that may come to us and say, give us land, give us money because someone else got it, or the trust that you have in them. This was an arrangement that was made with all parties believing it could be done, and I have no problem working with them. But I don't think it's fair for the Y to even ask us, to extend this out for another 17 years and get nothing out of it, because it's not fair to those that need housing now and to how much we're struggling for it. I think they have to come back, as well as not just the governments, but I think the Y has to come back to the table and help to at least make the interest payments and small payments on the principal, so we can look at helping others with this money and not having it tied up forever with just the one organization. And I think it was a great project. I'm proud of what we all did together, but I think there has to be some respect for the process and the ability to have that money flow back into the system to be used on other projects.
Thank you, Councillor Schreiner. Any other people wishing to speak? Okay, then. So I guess we have this motion that I've moved, which we can put up on the screen. And this essentially refers this for further negotiation with the province. That's in a nutshell what we're doing. I'm ready to call the question on that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. With your concurrence, Mr. Williams has very kindly agreed that he would, I think, stand down, defer. It's not Mr. Williams. Who is it? Mr. Rossini? Mr. Oh, and Mr. Meikle is in. Where I didn't see Mr. Meikle. Is he hiding in the back there? And again, I'll seek your concurrence, members of the committee, to put over, with apologies, the presentation, because it is a presentation on smart cities. It's just an update, and I'm just trying to, have us not, devote undue time to that. Just at this moment in time, we have one more item with quite a few deputations left to do. So, are you agreeable, members of the committee, to deferring that matter to the next meeting?
I'll move that.
All right. Although moved by Councillor Thompson. Beg pardon? To October. Yeah. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. That brings us to item 27.30, Toronto Police Service matter, on which we have deputations. We're going to be hearing from deputants on this topic, and I'm just going to make a brief comment. Before we do, I'm going to say now, for the benefit of the deputants, before we hear from them, that it is my understanding Councillor Thompson will be moving a motion and that I support his recommendation. I think this allows us to acknowledge this item, but that it will receive no further response. The fact that we've been asked to respond to this item at all is a political stunt that is meant to divide people. And that is not what I'm about as mayor, it is not what this committee is about, and it's not what council is about, and it's not what our city should be about. My support for the police is not in question. I support our police, the members of this committee support the police, and the members of City Council support the police. People know that. But supporting the police doesn't mean that you avoid difficult conversations. I am a strong supporter of city staff, but I also know that we have to be looking for ways all the time to improve. And so support for a particular group and desire to see improvement are not mutually exclusive. The backers of this political stunt would have you believe that, but it's an utterly false choice. It's an utterly false choice. And so and I'm sure the members of the committee, and we're going to hear from people today, wholeheartedly support the active efforts by Chief Saunders and the Police Board, of which I'm a member, to modernize policing in Toronto and improve trust with the Black community and other diverse communities across the city. And supporting our frontline officers, as I do, means understanding that trust from the community is their greatest asset, and that we have to work together to protect that trust for the benefit of the police and the community. That's what real support looks like. So now we'll hear from the deputies who have taken time from their day to come down here for this item, and we will take them in order that they're listed on the list here. The first one being Brian DeMattos. Is Mr. DeMattos here? Mr. DeMattos, you are here? Is that okay? Please come forward, sir. Thank you for your patience, Mr. DeMattos. You can sit right there, anywhere you're comfortable. Are you going to use your computer? Like, you need to hook it up to the system or just read? Oh, okay. All right, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Just need 2 seconds, and I'm good. Okay.
We'll be ready while Mr. DeMattos is getting ready. Danny Pacey is next, and then followed by Andrea Vasquez Jimenez. So those are the next two after that, just so they can be ready with their computers or whatever they're needing to do. Are you ready to go, Mr. DeMattos? Okay.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your comments earlier, John Tory. I completely agree. Greetings, respected council members of the Executive Committee and Giorgio. My name is Brian DeMattos, and I'm a very active member within the LGBTQ communities. Many of us are here today to oppose this motion that is rooted in anti-Black racism, homophobia, and transphobia. We are shocked that an individual who's trying to pass this motion, whose historical relationship with my community has been trying to devalue us and defund us at every year Pride event. So we want to make sure that all members of City Council get this message, that City Council George Millennium in particularly. The message we want you to remember this upcoming election season is that we will never again allow you to use our name as lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and two-spirited folks so you can discriminate against other Black members of our communities and Black communities as a whole. We denounce your attempts trying to use political diverse tactics to divorce Blackness from queerness, Blackness from transness. We will not allow it. You will not be able to, because again, simply, we will not allow it. This motion was obviously written up and pushed forward from city officials without question who continue to remain ignorant about the LGBTQ community, our history, and the very history of Pride politics itself. We remind the city that Pride started as a protest, challenging, fighting, and denouncing police brutality in all forms. We all know well that this motion of anti-Black racism is another example of systematic racism in the municipal level and the pattern of certain councillors and the waste of tax dollars we use to entertain what clearly is attacking an amazing group of folks and volunteers who contribute to this community. Does councillor not know that the message he is really sending, or conveniently, are we just so close to an election year for practical motions to pass this committee? The motion lacks and is misleading. What's on the notion of, the motion lacks and misleads what support looks like. Let us remind this committee that City Council, with our tax dollars, affirms support for Toronto Police Services each year through the generous city budget we allocate for them. Let me also point out that the discriminatory motion that values one city employer after another, we should be affirming support for all City of Toronto employees, not just the ones we give guns to. I would also like to remind council members the police are not a marginalized or oppressed minority. They are not protected in the Charter of Rights because no one has ever experienced being oppressed for choosing to be a police officer. Operative word in this sentence, choice. As it's stated in this motion, the Toronto Police Services manages a host of public safety issues without praise or special recognition. This is not true. They get rewarded and praised every time they cash their paychecks. Perhaps it's my working class background, but I'm pretty sure folks don't need praise for doing a job they get paid for. It is unfair for you to present police work more valuable than any other job in this city. This is what discrimination looks like in the systematic level. Let us remind you, we will remain vigilant, we will remain informed, we will be active, and we will, as we always have done, will remain political. We will fight and challenge the City Hall at every opportunity where racism, homophobia, and transphobia motions are attempting to violate the core values of this city. Diversity is and will always remain our strength. And again, we'll never allow you to use our name. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mato. Are there questions for this deputant? Yes, Councillor Ramalady.
I apologize. I thought I heard a bit of an insult coming my way.
Oh, just one?
But I'm just wondering how offensive a motion that I'm trying to bring forward to have City Hall acknowledge our police department and support our police department has been taken in the vein that I've heard. I mean, I'm not sure where that's coming from, but I certainly would like to know. I support our police officers, and we've done this in the past. We've done it with all of our employees. Why are the police, in your opinion, not to be supported by City Hall?
I'm sorry that's what you think you heard, but let me elaborate a little. It's not the fact that you want to support police. It's the fact that this motion that's rooted in anti-Black racism, you want to use the LGBT community, which historically, with my community, the only experience we have with you is devaluing us and defunding us. So spare me as that this is a pro-police stance when you only care to use the name LGBT when you can further your political conservative goal. No, the police are supported by the city. Every day they get paid. This motion that clearly, if well read, is really offensive in the as it, you know nothing about the relationship we have with cops or the very politics of Pride. Do you know how Pride was started?
Yes, it is true, actually. You're supposed to address the chair so that we don't get into having what amounts to a debate. He asked you a question, and then you answer through the chair, but so if you could just keep that in mind, it's just part of it.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Well, to answer his question, it's not generally offensive to support the police, but this is nothing what the motion states. You are using divisive tactics, trying to divide Black Lives Matter, which, by the way, is a queer group.
What? I'm sorry, is what?
A queer group.
Okay.
If you ever met them, they're amazing LGBT folks who are part of our community, and that is why they were at Pride, because they were invited, because they belong, because we honor them. And you might not agree with all their tactics, but doesn't mean that they shouldn't still be listened to. And this idea of that this motion supports the police devalues every other job. Where's this motion to support all the maintenance workers of the City Hall? I've never seen past one.
So I, in my 27 years, have moved motions to support maintenance workers, to support our grassroots employees, to support our managers. Those motions have always come from me in the past, and this is no different than that. I'm having a hard time understanding why it is that yourself, and I've heard some comments even from the mayor today, that are pretty aggressive, I think, in saying that City Hall should not support its police department.
Interesting rhetoric you choose, so you're probably not paying attention. So let me be as very basic as much as I can, so that even he can understand. We are supporting the police every day when we use our tax dollars to pay them. We are supporting our police. Have you been to the TPS board? What about all the initiatives we sent? This motion, it is not the fact that you want to lie to us to say that this is supporting the police. This is a homophobic, transphobic, and anti-Black racist attack. You're attacking Black Lives Matter. You're using LGBTQ Pride. You're violating Pride Toronto's system of democracy, we as a community got together as a membership and voted this resolution down. And you're violating that. And you're supporting this divisive rhetoric that there is this, that the police are being victimized.
So when I wrote this motion up, there wasn't a feeling out there of being abandoned by the police. The local grassroots officers that I've talked to in the past have very clearly pointed to the fact that they feel like City Hall has neglected them, that they feel that their morale is down, that we take tools away from them, we take the money away from them, and when they're feeling this way.
Councillor? See, I'm sure there's a question coming, and it is we're just running out of time here too. But
I'm happy that you're interrupting me.
I'm just asking you to ask a question. It's question time. You'll have a chance to speak later.
When the insults fly,
there's no insult. There's no insult being given at all. I'm just asking you to ask a question.
So with the morale down the way it is, I felt that there was a need for City Hall to say to those grassroots officers, the majority of them that are good officers, that they're doing a good job and that we do support them at City Hall. You're seeing that as a completely different message. I'm still having a hard time understanding where you're feeling that way, because I'm pretty clear in terms of the motion. I support the police, and I do feel for them and how they're feeling today.
We have the question there. You answer it, please,
Yeah,
sir?
I see the question. Maybe it's my working class background, but to me, when I get paid for a job, I don't get, I don't expect to be congratulated every job I do. That comes with the paycheck. And you say that the police feel immoral? What about Miller? What about all these individuals in the Black community that don't have trust for the police? What about you using the LGBT community who decided together that we need the police to step aside so we can help folks in our community build better relationships? It is so hard to understand that. And I know, you probably come from a wealthy background and things are just handed to you. But when I work for something, I don't expect a thank you.
Point of order.
All right, you're supposed to be addressing the chair again. I think we've probably taken this. I thank you very much. He just answered the question that Councillor Mamalady asked him, and we're over time only because the question ended after 5 minutes. Are there other questions of this deputant? Okay. Well, thank you very much, sir, for your contribution.
Thank you, Mayor Tory.
Danny Pacey, or Danny Pacey. Sorry, is it Danny or Danny?
That's right.
Danny.
Correct.
Okay. You saw the rules, 5 minutes, and you're most welcome, and please make your comments.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks to the Executive Committee for waiting through the rest of the day and hearing these deputations all the way to the end. Thank you so much. My name is Danny Pacey. I'm a resident of Ward 26, and I'm a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice Toronto, also known as Surge Toronto. Surge Toronto is a local chapter of an international network of white people organizing for racial justice. The Toronto chapter has over 1,000 affiliated members, and over 200 of them are actively undertaking work around the city. So I have to preface my statements by saying that although I'm here to ask the committee to vote against the motion, I do not speak as a representative of BLMTO, nor does Surge claim to represent BLMTO. We're here in our own capacity. Now, I'm personally am present as both a white person and, it must be said, a member of the LGBTQ community to hold this committee to account over the recommendations made in the interim Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism. Let me be very clear that motion EX 27.30 was written in a spirit of racism, in a spirit of anti-Black racism specifically. I am talking about the content of the motion, not the title. It must be read word for word, comprehensively end to end. Now, before I get into it, I will reiterate one of BLMTO's demands, which really captures why Surge TO is here today. BLMTO have demanded, quote, a condemnation of Toronto Police's excessive use of force and ongoing intimidation and harassment tactics against Black Lives Matter Toronto protesters. I ask you, Mr. Mayor, to consider how motion EX 27.30 is exactly such an act of intimidation. There are no two ways about it. Motion EX 27.30 is explicitly intended to discredit BLMTO It seeks to create precedent in council for supporting police over civilians when discussing issues of justice for Black people, including Black LGBTQ people, and I think Brian spoke to that pretty clearly. The motion lashes out, seeking to discredit, vilify, and demonize a specific community group, a group of constituents with valid concerns on the basis of race. In doing so, it engages in hypocrisy because the motion equates protest with bad behavior of the very kind the motion is engaged in. Mr. Mayor, the interim Toronto action plan to confront anti-Black racism, issued in June just of this year, so just only 3 months ago, coalesces over 40 years of studies and reports that prove the existence of anti-Black racism in this city. Theme number 5 of the report is policing in the justice system. By the admission of this report, Mr. Mayor, Black residents of the city are over-policed and racially profiled, and that's on page 35. You can look it up. A vote for the motion before us would directly contradict the mandate of that action plan. Let me rephrase. Because the motion before us targets BLMTO specifically and refuses to take seriously their concerns about anti-Black racism, white supremacy, and police violence, the motion is engaging in racism. By supporting this motion, you would be emboldening future racism and anti-Black racism on City Council. So I urge you to throw this motion out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Pacey. Are there questions of this deputant, Councillor Mammoliti?
So the motion speaks to a group that has decided to take hostage on a number of different occasions. Events that have taken place, like the parade in question and mentioned in my motion. A parade that the taxpayers help fund. And what we're just supposed to sit back and accept that kind of hostage taking on a regular basis. The group continually takes over public spaces and harasses the police, in my opinion. And we are just supposed to just sit back and let that sort of anarchy take place in the City of Toronto?
I object, Mr. Chair, to the use of the words hostage taking. In this case, I believe it is equating a really violent act with an act of protest, which BLMTO's actions are. And I believe protest is engaged in. I'm not here to debate protest tactics. I am here to support the actions of BLMTO because they believe and do experience over-policing in this city and are looking for a way to communicate it to ears that would otherwise not hear them. So I encourage you to throw this motion out. I will reiterate, I am not here to debate protest tactics. That's not my place. That's not my...
You're here to...
That's not my goal.
To debate over-policing, as you call it?
I am. I'm here to encourage you to vote in line with the interim Toronto action plan.
What does over-policing mean to you?
Those terms are all defined in the action plan.
But I'm asking you right now.
Okay.
What does it mean to you?
I've given you an answer, sir. Thank you.
Do I have...
Well, she said she did answer. She said she buys into the definition in the report. So that's an answer.
So I'd like to know what that definition to her might be. Without interjections, of course, from the committee and yourself, Mr. Mayor, if that's possible.
I didn't interject at all, except to say she did answer the question. If she wants to say that, do you want to say anything more, Ms.?
I don't have anything more to say.
Of course not.
Okay.
Of course not.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Pacey. Andrea Vasquez Jimenez. Good afternoon.
Hi.
You have 5 minutes to make your comments.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So just to provide some context, my name is Andrea Vasquez Jimenez. I'm co-chair of Latinx, Afro-Latin America, Avia Yala Education Network through our own community consultations, forums, and knowledge exchanges to community members from our 3-year action plan from 2015 to 2018. One of our action pieces is for the full removal of the SRO program. So just want to provide some context there. First and foremost, please be aware that the summary that Councillor Mammoliti provided in regards to this motion, EX 27.30, indeed solely is utilized to vilify Black Lives Matter Toronto. Indeed, this dehumanizing and even dehumanizing narrative bears no truth. Black Lives Matter Toronto opposes and exposes police brutality and systemic issues such as anti-Blackness in various institutions, and primarily that of the policing institution. We are well aware that it is public information that Etobicoke York Community Council earlier this year sent a joint letter to the attention of the Toronto Police Services Board in support of the SRO program. The fact that a support letter was even created highlights and speaks volumes of those councillors who signed off on it as to their lack of knowledge on the multiple issues and lack of concern for their communities as to those who they deem to represent, along with erasure of their community voices, lived experiences, and particularly those who are most impacted, marginalized, and vulnerable. In regards to the research, this is not an exhaustive list, but instead speaks to the truth that there are multiple reports, findings, and research that speaks to the negative impacts, experiences, and realities of our youth, in which public servants continue to dismiss. It also highlights solutions. There were 2 major community consultations completed: the Falconer Report on school safety and the 2008 McMurtry Curling Report on the roots of youth violence. These 2 reports came out of months of consultations with students, parents, teachers, and support workers, and recommended more frontline workers be placed in schools, not police officers. Most recently in 2017, Dr. Carl James from York University released a report titled Towards Race Equity in Education, where one of the repeated issues mentioned by participants in the study was that of the presence of police in schools has a devastating effect on Black students, and that it contributed to a process of criminalization of Black students and the entrenchment of school-to-prison pipeline. In addition, there are many organizations aside from Black Lives Matter Toronto who are demanding the full removal of the SRO program. Organizations such as LAN, Educators for Peace and Justice, Jane and Finch Coalition of Community Organization, SURGE, Jane and Finch Coalition Against Poverty, East Enders Against Racism, 180 Change Street, African Canadian Coalition of Community Organizations, Education Not Incarceration, No Cops, and many other organizations, some of them even advocating for the removal of SROs since its inception. There's also a petition of over 1,000 signatures demanding the removal of the SRO program. In addition, within a publicly accessible article by News Talk 1010 entitled, quote, West End Toronto Councillor signed petition to back Cops in Schools program, end quote. Mamalidi slammed the argument from the SRO program critics as to Black students become a target for harassment. Councillor Mamalidi is directly quoted stating that, quote, it's hogwash, end quote, and that, quote, instead of us listening to them, we should be ignoring them, end quote. Within the article, Mamalidi frames the debate as city business being, quote, hijacked by a small minority that, quote, wants to cause chaos in the city. Mamalidi's statements, just as in this article of News Talk 1010 and this motion summary, are misleading the public by misrepresenting the issues at hand and not being in service of the public that have actually elected him. In fact, this makes us believe that since indeed this motion is out of order for the City of Toronto, and because it can only be deemed as something symbolic and even strategical for own purposeful gain, it seems to be that potentially Mamalidi has put this forward as a self-serving agenda. Mamalidi has been criminally investigated by the Toronto Police Service previously, which is also publicly known. Therefore, this is deemed as an attempt to solely befriend them, potentially. What many councillors and city public servants have forgotten, and not only Mamalidi, is that you are public servants. You are here to service the public. And please do not believe the false narratives that have been provided within the context of this motion.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Questions of the deputant, Councillor Mamalidi?
Could it be that when we're speaking about the officers that are in our schools and the program that, in my opinion, has worked incredibly, could it be that those police officers have actually done their job in having children understand who they are and like them as not only police officers but human beings? Could it be that there's just a small group of people out there that actually know that the officers can very quickly get to the problem now and they don't want those officers around because in fear of perhaps what they've got something up their sleeve? Could it be that the cops are actually doing their job and people are afraid of that?
So in regards to what you have, through the chair, what you have spoken about is actually against the multiple amount of findings and research that is readily available. You can actually look it up via Google or through attending University of Toronto or York University, speaking with Dr. Carl James, who is against the SRO program, along with George J. Seva-Day, which is an anti-racist educator at OISE at University of Toronto. These are about systemic issues and not about individual officers. This is about anti-Black racism entrenched within institutions. And so it essentially goes against the research that we have. And it's not only the research that I've provided today, we can definitely provide all other methods of research. That way, everyone can be much more well-informed. We also have an SRO community consultation and call to action at Black Creek Community Health Center. You're more than welcome to attend. It's going to be on October the 11th, 4:30 until 7:30 p.m.
Could it be that officers on the front lines of our streets were actually getting to know those that were committing the crimes and knew exactly perhaps when those crimes would be committed with guns and drugs and otherwise, and that this strategy that seems to be put in place by Black Lives Matter and others is a tactic in trying to get the police off their back? Could it be?
Well, this is not a brand new issue. It didn't actually start as soon as Black Lives Matter highlighted it. This has been an issue since its inception. Statistically, we see racial profiling. We are very much aware by the Toronto Police Service Board, they had advised that SROs are on information gathering teams. What we're not aware of is as to where this data, what database this actually leads to. We've actually even seen statistically an increase, not only in arrest, but as well as increase of charges. Instead of utilizing detention, suspensions, or even expulsion. So we've actually seen also a school to prison pipeline, and not all kids get the same chances, right? We do see a predominant of Black and Indigenous students being affected, not necessarily most white students.
Could it be that the only people that are disagreeing with this motion seem to be a few politicians around this table and don't want to deal with it, and that perhaps the majority of Torontonians are sick and tired of any one group going after its police officers and want to show support for the police officers? Could it be that the majority of Torontonians actually support this motion and want City Hall to support its police officers and let them know that we're listening to how they're feeling in terms of their morale? Could it be?
I think that having the most highest budget for Toronto Police Service already speaks for itself. And I can't necessarily speculate as to what other residents of Toronto are thinking, but definitely it's not a popularity contest. When we're looking to attack anti-Black racism at its roots, within institutions, within processes, within policies, we have to really look at the systemic issues and not looking at police as just individual officers. We have to really look at what's the historical and present impact of the police force and police institutions on our youth and educators and parents within the bounds of classrooms and schools. And what I was speaking to today was more so through the chair, the context of the agenda item as to Mamalidi's words in regards to demonizing Black Lives Matter Toronto.
Could it be that our local neighborhoods want a police department that will show up when they're called, that they'll want their police officers at a grassroots level to be happy when they come out knowing that they've got the full support of Toronto? Could it be that I'm right, that in our local pockets and our own communities, people are saying, why did we do this to the police department?
Last question.
Could it be?
So through the chair, we already have community policing, even in regards to school relationships. School resource officers are essentially stationed at various schools. That is very much different from already our community policing with school relationships. It's very much distinct.
Thank you, Ms. Jimenez. Are there any other questions for the deputant? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your deputation. Mark Smith, co-chair, Toronto Seniors Forum. Not here. Mark Smith. Scout Swartz.
Thanks for having me. Do I just speak right into this?
Do you just do which?
Do I just speak right into this?
Yes, you just sit down there and it'll pick you up.
So, yeah, my name is Scout Swartz. I'm here as an individual and as a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice Toronto, and I am actually here putting into the public record a stack of hundreds of postcards signed by members of public across all wards of this city, asking you, Mayor Tory, I appreciated your comments earlier, but asking you, as well as other members of this Executive Council, to take a strong stance against anti-Black racism in City Council, and especially against this anti-Black motion today. So I'll enter that in afterwards. And I'll just get my thing here. So yeah, I'm here today to actually, I guess, counter the narrative that it's just a small pocket of Torontonians that oppose not only this motion here today, but also that actually do support the work of Black, Indigenous, and people of color identified organizers in the city who are working to bring about greater change and combat anti-Black racism. So I'm vested in racial justice and working within white communities and largely white spaces to challenge this type of racism and support their work. And since we have been considering genocide today and systemic violence more broadly, I want to note that I come into this work as a Jew, and I learned extensively in my youth about the Holocaust and about what can happen when a state or government target, scapegoat, and harm a population that is seen as deserving of this treatment or seen as less than, and what happens when no one says anything about it, and when people stand by and watch it happen simply because it isn't happening to them. So I want the entire council here, committee here, to keep that in mind. This motion is symbolic in nature, but what it represents is the worst of humanity. I urge you to reject it. It is embarrassing and shameful for city councilors, but that does not mean that we should dismiss this motion as irrelevant. It is very intentional on the part of its creator. Mammoliti's characterization of Black Lives Matter as divisive, dangerous, and bullying invokes long-standing racist ideas of Black people who fight for their safety, human dignity, and survival as being somehow dangerous to those who are in positions of privilege or power. Oppressors in power have always sought to discredit and denounce groups that resist their oppression. We saw this rhetoric in the time of slavery, in the civil rights era, and we see it still today. This motion is anti-progress. When Black communities or other marginalized communities demand better, demand equity, and demand the condition to survive and thrive, they are seen as somehow dangerous. And this is racist because it implies that their right to life is somehow harmful. This is also dangerous, as in reality, this idea is used against Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities as the justification for their harm, violence, and even death, often at the hands of police. We do have a problem in this city. The Toronto Police Service is out of control. They have been for quite some time. This is not a new problem. It is only now making news because people love to make news out of Black Lives Matter. That's what Mammoliti is doing, and we know this. But regardless of how this motion goes down today, we do have a problem in this city, and each of you are in a position to fix it. It's actually your jobs, and you are accountable to your constituents and to the people in this city, all of the people. Like, I see the time that you give to ravines, and that's great, but the Toronto Police has a deep-rooted anti-Black racism problem, and there must be action taken against this. This motion, when released, referred to police bashing being at an all-time high, which is actually quite fitting in that police bashing, as in police brutalization of Black communities, is at an all-time high. It is likely actually at the same level, but we're being made aware of it now. In the spirit of Andrew Loku's memory, in thinking about DeFonte Miller, These officers who brutalized these Black community members were allowed to remain in service or in service for months. We're seeing undocumented children being put in harm's way because of police officers at schools. As other speakers have mentioned, BLM did not create the issues that they bring attention to. They represent long-standing issues that communities have tried to raise and have been ignored. The abuses within the TPS continue, and yet Mamalidi and the media seek to vilify Black Lives Matter.
I'll have to ask you to wrap up now. It's 5 minutes.
Sure.
Thank you.
So, Black Lives Matter activists are giving us a gift. They're providing you and us all with a key to solve a puzzle that has many missing pieces. They are harassed by police, they're giving death threats, and they are subject to motions like this one which seek to distort the truth. If a Toronto bridge were to collapse and Torontonians were killed, this committee would not be considering a motion to affirm support for city engineers. Someone would be held accountable, maybe even fired, and the city would be compensating victims and fixing whatever conditions made it possible.
All right, I'll have to stop it there because
Okay.
we've gave you an extra
Time to
40
make
seconds.
change.
Thanks very much. Okay, questions of the deputant? All right, there are no questions. Well, thank you very much for your deputation. Appreciate it. Thank you for your patience. Lisa Guthrow. Hello. You have 5 minutes.
Yes.
You're welcome here.
Okay, good evening or afternoon, Executive Committee members. I'm grateful for my right as a constituent to make a deputation. As a Toronto-born citizen who goes to rallies and has been on strike as a teacher, I'm opposed to this motion. It wants us to believe that protest is dangerous, and it wants us to believe that uniformed officers are just regular people walking around. I cannot accept these two premises, therefore I cannot accept this motion. Protest is protected activity in a democracy. Protest can stop and block meetings, parades, traffic, and is intended to cause disruption. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association reminds us that strong protections for the right to protest are essential to informed and meaningful political debate. I cannot accept the moral claims that Black Lives Matter has vilified and demonized the Toronto Police Service. Protest is disruption, not aggression. Protest is a right. The second point is that the Toronto Police Service isn't a person. When uniformed officers walk around as people, they aren't actually by themselves, but are rather propped up by powerful systemic policies. They're supported by a large institution, their salaried union executives, the law, their right to carry and use firearms. I'm all for the protection of people. The Ontario Human Rights Code provides freedom from discrimination for persons, not for occupations or occupations with uniforms. The Toronto Police Service as an entity is not capable of being victimized by and is not equal to volunteers in a protest group. It is false reasoning, and I don't buy it. Furthermore, you can take off the uniform of your job, but you can't escape your social existence. I'm the mother of a Black daughter who is now an adult. When she was a teenager, I did not have the option to say, you're going to the Eaton Centre with your Black friends? Change into your whiteness outfit so no one thinks you're a shoplifter. The Toronto Police Service isn't a person. It does not inhabit a body. It is not flesh. It does not need emotion for its protection. I am worried about the problematic implications of the adoption of this motion. It has the potential to plant the seeds for American-style beliefs and legislation. The U.S. has hate crime protection laws that now include the police. Louisiana, in 2016, with the highest incarceration rate in the world, was the first of 16 states to have another reason to make its citizens criminals. Toronto police are not vulnerable victims in need of protection. Let's not go the Blue Lives Matter route. The danger of this motion is the fabrication of Black Lives Matter Toronto as an enemy. The danger of this motion is the manufacturing of the message that protest is in anticipation of violence, and I don't buy it. I want to choose a racially just Toronto that supports democracy. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Are there questions of the deputant? Councillor Mamalidi.
So you don't think that City Hall should show some support to the police department after a couple of weeks of them trying to, I guess, get out the message on how the force is feeling out there? You don't think that City Hall should take note of it and say that we do support our police officers?
I don't agree with the premise of the argument, the motion. I don't agree with it.
You don't agree with that?
No, I believe in protecting people.
Right.
Basis on their social existence, but not occupations. I'm a teacher, believe me. I know what it's like to be vilified. I know what it's like to be on strike. You know, oh, we got the great pension, all that business. Okay, but I can go home. I can't escape the social existence. And I have a daughter. I have a daughter who I've been through many things with her, and I know my privilege. And when I'm with the Black community, that's how I realize that I have the privilege, and that's why I'm here speaking.
I'm not sure where the attack comes from with respect to what I'm saying. I have some ideas on how it got orchestrated, but at the end of the day, there cannot be a city that ignores what's going on with the hijacking, and this motion was to bring light to that. By ignoring the plight of the police officers and the plight of my constituents, who are very loud and clear, by saying no to this motion, or in this case, ignoring it completely and saying off to La La Land, do you really think that we're suggesting to police officers out there that are feeling uncomfortable that City Hall is behind them?
Point of privilege. I just want to remind and inform deputants, if you didn't already know this, that you are under no obligation to answer these questions. You have the right for 5 minutes, and we are happy to hear from you, but you are not under any obligation to feel you need to answer.
Thank you for that. I don't think that's my privilege, but there was a question there, so you can answer it if you wish.
But thanks anyway, Councillor.
Well, yeah, my
Okay, let's just allow the deputy to answer if she wishes.
Okay. Yeah, no, my point is that they're already supported by, the system of police. They can carry guns. They have all kinds of means. They have, I'm a teacher. We have our union to do, we have the union to do our work, to go to for the Charter Challenge. Volunteers in a protest group don't have the same access that the police already have. I don't see the point of having, a motion for further support when they're not even a group of people. They're like a job, right?
Well, a job needs resources, and like teachers whose resources have been taken away for the children in order for them to do their job, teachers have felt the same way over the years. Having to do a job without the resources because government keeps taking them away. In this particular case, we have officers who walk our streets every day who are asking us those questions. Why did you take the resources away for us to be able to do the job comfortably, knowing that we need to get to the crime and the root of it? And those are the questions that are being asked of us. So are you aware that City Hall, in its endeavor to save money at the expense of the police, have pretty much crippled the police department in many ways?
Yeah, I didn't really get into the specifics. For me, I'm looking at structural racism. And if you take an anti-racist education or workshop, you will learn there's structural racism, institutional racism, interpersonal racism, and internalized racism. I'm looking at the structural racism, which is beliefs, norms, cultural values. That's what I'm looking at, the underlying message in this, which permeates across institutions. So I'm really afraid of the slippery slope here, that we're sort of equating a job with people and sort of co-opting, and it's almost insulting to groups who are, who are trying to be heard. And
It's,
Any other demand?
that was the last question for this
Just
deputy.
one of them.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you very much, Ms. Guthrie. Thank you for your comment. Any other questions of this deputy? Okay. Ilanit Gorin. Is Ilanit Gorin here? Okay. Malika Mendez. Good afternoon, Ms. Mendez. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Deputy Mayor. Rather, I should say good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of Council, members of the staff, and members of the public who have stayed this long. I'm here to represent the Urban Alliance on Race Relations and to address this motion to affirm Council support for Toronto Police Services, put forward by Councillor Mammoliti. The question is begged as to why this motion now? Why now? When we have a city that is grappling with so many vital and pressing issues, such as the housing crisis, the opioid crisis, the homelessness crisis, just to name a few. When the city has finally taken its step on the path to confront and address anti-Black racism, as illustrated by the draft action plan earlier this year, why now? When the city has decided to build bridges with its communities, why now take this polarizing and divisive step? Urban Alliance urges the Council to consider the social and political context in which this motion is set. For over 40 years, we have been fighting racism through education, research, and community development, working to build bridges between ethno-racial communities in this city, between ethno-racial communities and Toronto institutions, including the Toronto Police Service. But we are living at a time when racism has shape-shifted, and it has taken a covert and insidious form which is invisible to those of us who are not directly affected by it. For example, the phenomenon of racial profiling, which has been well documented and illustrated in data from Toronto and Ottawa. Even the United Nations Human Rights Council is troubled by what they call extraordinary overrepresentation of Black individuals when it comes to police use of lethal force in Canada. The Urban Alliance has supported the decision of Pride Toronto to ensure that the parade is a safe place that does not further harm or traumatize queer or trans people of color by asking TPS members wanting to march in the parade to do so as citizens, not as uniformed and armed officers. For those who call it a ban, it is inflammatory and inaccurate. Let us put it into context. The request was made as a natural consequence of the growing mistrust toward the police based on ongoing targeting of Black and racialized communities and persons through such practices as carding, street checks, and the disproportionate shooting and killing of Black and racialized individuals during police interactions, ultimately signaling that Black lives do not matter. With respect to the school resource officers, there has been considerable opposition not only from parents, community members, and school board educators, but many organizations, including Black Lives Matter. This motion before you today tables the term public safety, but we ask safety for whom? In reality, the students targeted through the SRO program are disproportionately Black and racialized youth. And the message that they are receiving is that the lives of Black children and youth are viewed as less than those of others. We do not for one moment suggest that the Toronto Police Services does not have good, dedicated people doing work in our communities. We see them. Many of them are members of the very communities that have historically had strained relationships with the police. This is not about individuals. This is a systemic issue. We must look at the Toronto Police as a system and evaluate its actions and impact as a systemic issue. This motion targets Black Lives Matter and its members, but it is clear that they aren't the issue. This is a distraction. The Council shouldn't use this group as a stepping stone or a device to advance the ideology that at its core, it is steeped in prejudice.
I'll ask you to wrap up if you can. Thank you.
We want to remind you, councillors, that you have taken a vote to protect and advance the ideals of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we urge you to vote no on this motion. Thank you, Mayor Tory. Thank you, members of council.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. Do we have questions of this deputant? All right. Seeing no questions, I will thank you very much for your patience and for being here today. Miguel Avila. Oh, I'm sorry. What I forgot to do at 6 o'clock was get your concurrence to extend the meeting to finish the agenda. And that's moved by Councillor Thompson. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So, Miguel Avila. Miguel, you know the rules. It's 5 minutes, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I've stayed here since 9:30 this morning, and I've been listening with a lot of patience what's going on in this council. It's so sad that we are talking about this issue when council should not pay attention to this divisive commentary of racism and discrimination by Councillor Giorgio Mamalotti. So I will ask this council please reject his motion, and we start to deal with the real issues that affect our city, which is poverty and racism. And that's all I had to say. Please. And I hope that the next motion that you guys put together shows that some concern for the people who have come and spend the whole afternoon here, and speaking on behalf of their families, and speaking on behalf of the children. And I demand that this conversation comes to an end today. Thank you very much.
Miguel, thank you. So, we always appreciate the public coming here, and unfortunately one item is going to be first and another one's going to be last, and some are going to be in between on the agenda in terms of the time it takes, but we appreciate you being here and everybody else that stayed and everybody else that was here earlier in the day. So thank you very much for that. Are there questions of Mr. Avila? Okay, seeing none, I'll thank you very much. Derek Moran? Mr. Moran, you know the rules. You have 5 minutes.
I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent, express or implied, in doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. So I have some good news to say about the police. I wish Councillor Karajanis was here at the last board meeting as a result of a conversation you, Mayor Tory, was having with Chief Saunders. He indicated basically that he has instructed or told his officers that he does not expect or want them to bust people for possession of marijuana anymore. And I would take that goes along with also if you're walking down the sidewalk and smoking one of them, that they won't get busted either. So that's, to me, that's something that's the police can build upon, because that's a matter that the community out there is being like, just leave these people alone. They're not harming anyone, especially the people that are in a lot of pain. They need to smoke that stuff to relieve their pain. So, I just want to, Councillor Mamalidi here, he's been the only councillor here who not once but twice, unbelievably, has ever asked me a question here. So I just want to let him know that, Mayor Tory, that back in May, I think it was, that I brought up with Chair Andy Pringle. It was the Barbara From Library consultation for the Transformational Task Force, where Chair Pringle was talking to me about the taser meeting. And I corrected Chair Pringle about the taser meeting. I said, that wasn't really a meeting about tasers. Oh, Mayor Tory, did you want to start the clock on my time? Oh, that one's broken, I guess. Okay. And I corrected Chair Pringle, and I said, you know what, that wasn't really a meeting about tasers. If anything, that was an opportunity for people to show up and get it off their chest about how much they hate the police. And it was a long and disturbing night, and Councillor Michael Thompson right there was there. So I don't know if he wants to, you know, add anything at the end of that about what I just said. And what Chair Pringle said to me is he looked at me and he said, you know what, I'm not going to say you're wrong on that. So, like, it's not just Black Lives Matter. Like, there were brown people that night, there were white people that night, there were Native people that night that got up, and just the anguish in their voice about how they've been mistreated about the police. Sure, there are good police officers out there, you know, like, for instance, new Deputy Chief Shauna Coxon at that City Hall consultation for the Transformational Task Force admitted to me, Miguel was there, that she admitted to me that eventually she said that in her own way that yes, the Crown is the surety for the person we all have. So, I mean, that's something. That's some act of transparency on her part. And there was a moment where Superintendent Bergen walked up to a guy named Derek George, who I think he had something to do with some maybe police brutality. And Superintendent Frank Bergen pointed right at that guy and said, hey, if that ever happens again, you come find me. You hold me accountable. So I thought that was rather stand-up of Superintendent Frank Bergen. But unfortunately, Mayor Tory, as you found out, as we all found out, at the police board meeting on Thursday, there was a rather ugly incident that apparently took place. Those bare legs there are not of a guy wearing shorts. Those bare legs there are of a woman, a Black woman, wearing a dress, and that police officer there is not helping her look for her lost contact lens. As that is, Councillor Thompson might be familiar with her, that is well-known community activist and advocate Dion Renee. Apparently, as she put it, of course the video hasn't been released yet to the public to see what went on, she was violently grabbed around the throat, amongst other things, and taken down to the ground. Seems like she smashed her face against it because she was holding an ice pack up against it. She came upstairs unbelievably to do her deputations. And you know what was so messed up about all this? One of the deputations she spoke on, Mayor Tory, was advocating on behalf of the police. She even said, I can't believe after what's just happened to me, I'm still here advocating on behalf of the police. So what I would do is call on Councillor Mamalidi and Councillor Karygiannis simply as an act of impartiality to lend their voices in supporting that the police release the video and let's show what happened to Dion Renee that day on Thursday in police headquarters.
All right, and on that note, we'll thank you. That's 5 minutes on the button. And we thank you for your deputation. Are there any questions of this deputant? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Moran. Appreciate that.
Oh, I don't consent to being referred to as Mr. Rector. I don't consent to being referred to as Mr.
Miroslav Glavich, I didn't see. Oh, yes, there he is. Okay. Mr. Glavich, thank you for waiting. You have 5 minutes. You know the rules.
No, I don't. Can you repeat them? All the people behind me are not going to like me in about 2 seconds. I disagree with what they say. I agree with Councillor Mamaliti. I know you won't hear. I have a, hold on. What's it called? I'm just going to read you 2 sentences of an article in the Huffington Post. They were talking about racism. One of the co-founders, what's it called? Kogali, mused that by having white skin, white people are subhuman. Please, Allah, give me strength not to kill these men and white folks out here today. Please, please, please. That's what this individual tweeted. I don't. A lot of. That's not the only member of BLMTO that has mentioned that. I support all sides talking,
there is a proper way to talk. I'm doing right now. I fully support the police, and I agree with you. 99% of police officers are very good. They have no problem. Just because a police officer stops you doesn't mean they're stopping you because of the color of your skin. The other 1%, I haven't met every Toronto police officer. Unlike some of these people behind me, I'm not going to generalize all police officers. I talked to you about three great officers in the Toronto Police, Peter DeQuintal, Randall Arsenault, and Kirk Papadopoulos. They do excellent work. You can follow them, you know. There should be more talk and all this vile garbage back and forth, especially from these people. The police chief...
People, sorry, can you explain what you mean by people?
Mr. Villa, please, please, you've had your chance, and now we're just letting Mr. Glavich have his chance. Thank you. All right, please go ahead, Mr. Glavich.
He knows how to contact me if he wants to ask me a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. You want it? I don't like when any group is all completely generalized. Our chief is black. That's one thing, and he has constantly asked BLM, Black Lives Matter Toronto, to come to police headquarters or meet them. They continuously said no. They haven't accepted most of the meetings. Everybody needs support. There's a low morale, and you know, it's like I agree with you. You know, I know great police officers. Most of them. And I'm willing to meet every single one of them. They're not racist. You know, if somebody stops you, it's because 99% chances you're doing a crime or just want to say hello, not because they want to arrest you because of the color of your skin. That's it.
Thanks, Mr. Glavich. Are there any questions of the deputy? Okay, hearing none, I'll thank you very much, and that brings us to the end of the list of deputants on this matter. Are there any questions of staff about this? Okay, those wishing to speak. Members visiting the committee, Councillor Mammoliti.
Mr. Mayor, you've made your comments already earlier in terms of the intent that you have. I'm flabbergasted at the insult. I am incredibly not surprised that when someone like myself who believes that they're speaking for all constituents in the City of Toronto, at least the majority of them, want to do something that I think is needed at City Hall for a change. You get heckled and name-called, and I guess over the years you get used to it as well. When someone doesn't want us to do something, instead of respecting a particular councillor for doing what they're doing, they intend to go after them personally, and that's the way I see things happening and unfolding here at City Hall with many of the things that I do here, and this is no different. When Pride defended others that got involved with their parade in the Jewish community is very upset. It was Councillor Mammoliti that said, that's wrong, we shouldn't be doing it. And what did they call me? Homophobic. Today, I disagree with Black Lives Matter and their agenda. I think that they are disruptive. I think they're the ones that are divisive in our society. I think that most people in the City of Toronto, Mr. Mayor, whether you want to agree with me or not, and whether you see it or not, disagree with your point of view here and would agree with mine. That Black Lives Matter needs to be taken on by City Hall, and it needs to stop. And there needs to be leadership to stop that kind of behavior. You can't have people insulting your police department. You can't have them going after them. You can't have them doing the things that they're doing every day by targeting them. And then for us as politicians who are supposed to be defending our employees and the police, by just simply saying, well, they seem to be right and we're going to ignore it. And I think what this committee is about to do today does just that. I think that what's going to happen here is that we're taking a motion that could have been very easily dealt with at council to support our police department and to support those men and women on our force. And instead what you're doing now is you're reversing it, and you're not supporting our police department and those men and women on our force by doing what you're doing today. By not voting for this and by sending it off to wherever you're going to send it off to is the wrong approach, and most people in the City of Toronto will not like what you're going to do today. And I know that. And I think deep down inside you know that too, and you're hoping for the best. But at the end of the day, we have a problem, and we're turning our heads to that particular problem. You can't have people just take up the streets, let them do whatever they want, and go after police. Our police want to do their job. Our police were hoping that the resources that we've taken away from them weren't taken away from them. We continually do it, and it's not just Black Lives Matter that they feel bad with respect to how they're doing their job. It's us too, because we keep taking their resources away from them and expecting them to protect the citizens of Toronto. So we can laugh, Mr. Mayor, you can smile all you like, but at the end of the day, I think you're making a mistake here, and I think that the men and women of our police force need to be congratulated and supported for the hard work that they're doing. And someone said earlier, Mr. Mayor, that this is a system. I forgot how they put it down. The police is that we should be supporting or not supporting a particular system. No, it's not a system. They're human beings. They're people behind those uniforms, and people with emotions and feelings as well. I recall Councillor Bellau standing up in council when we were ready to look at saving money with cleaners. Councillor Bellau started to cry in the council chamber because she put a face to every one of those cleaners. It wasn't the system she was talking about. She saw that they were human beings like anyone else. We have had these debates internally continually in terms of our staff and how we support them or whether we don't. We've had these motions passed and voted on before. But for some reason, this one has touched a nerve, and a nerve that doesn't exist in our streets in Toronto. I know Councillor Thompson is asking me to stop, and I will.
No, I think you just.
I just think you're wrong.
Your time is up. So.
I think you're wrong in your approach, and I think you're doing the complete opposite of what Torontonians want you to do today.
Thanks, Councillor Emily.
It's on a point of privilege.
Beg pardon?
On a point of privilege.
Yes. Oh, I see.
I wasn't asking anybody to
You weren't asking to speak.
I was directing you, as I have all day and most meetings, reminding you of the time.
I was watching.
Yes.
But I want to give Councillor Emily his chance. It's his motion that we're talking about here. Are there other speakers? I'm going to say a few words. You do have, at some point. Oh, no, there aren't any other members of the committee here, so we're now bringing it into the committee.
I'd love to speak. Yeah. So I have a motion staff has that I'm moving to defer this indefinitely. And I won't say much other than to simply say that we ought not to pit groups against one another. We ought not to use institutions and pit them against our citizens. This is a very careless and reckless approach to supposedly tackling a problem that one perceives. There are problems systemically that has impact on everyone in this city. We have a great group of police officers in this city. I think that it's important to recognize that on a daily basis, they're respected throughout this city by the very people who are impacted and those who are not impacted by them. They have a tough job that they do. But to pit groups against one another and to use this body or council would in fact be inappropriate and not in the best interests of being able to bring parties together and to address some of the systemic issues that does exist in this city. And it isn't just the police department that we can point a finger at. It's bigger than that, quite frankly. And I think it has to be understood. And so while I think that there are efforts to villainize some, we ought not to take that approach, quite frankly. No one needs to be, villainized in this particular sense. I think what we ought to do is demonstrate, as we are as Canadians, we are compassionate in terms of how we deal with issues. When we see a problem, we call it out. We try to address the issues surrounding those particular problems. When there's an opportunity for us to be able to bring people together, we actually do that. We have an opportunity to do that. This particular motion is actually not well intended in that sense in terms of bringing people together and collaborating. And so for that reason, Mr. Mayor, I move that we defer this particular item indefinitely. And I want to thank all the people who've come out to speak. They have spoken quite eloquently with respect to this particular issue. I don't need to add more to what they have stated. It's very clear. It's on the public record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Are there others wishing to speak? Councillor Barlow?
Just very quickly, I would like to echo Councillor Thompson's comments and your comments that you said at the beginning, that there is no question, I have no question that any member of this executive or member of council doesn't support our police force. And I'd like to take the chance to thank the leadership at the police force for the work that is being done with the transformation of our force. But there are issues that need to be addressed, and people need to be together. We need to bring people together. And I agree with Councillor Thompson. I don't think this motion would do that. We need to have the conversations. We need to get to the roots of the problems, and bringing motions like this is not going to help. I think that we need to support the conversation. We need to make space for the conversation to happen. That is our role, is to make sure that those issues are being addressed to the root of the problem. That is taking leadership on this issue, and I think that questioning if we're supporting our force or if we're supporting this group versus the other is not the reason to do it. We need to put the resources, absolutely, to ensure that both these groups and the police have what it takes to address these issues and have the space to have these conversations. And I think that we're heading that way. And if we had this motion here in front of us, it would not be appropriate, or it would not be helpful at all. So thank you for the motion. I'll be supporting that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Others to speak? Well, I'll just reset the clock and say a couple of words then. I honestly believe, first of all, the notion that this committee, that this mayor, or that the city council for that matter, doesn't support the police or any part of it, I think is grossly unfair and a gross misstatement of the reality. I think we, in many different ways, all support the police, and that is why I believe this is a political stunt and that it is something deliberately meant to be divisive. And the last thing this city needs right now, at a time when we are the most diverse city in the world, and that by itself, among other things, presents big challenges for us to deal with. And those challenges are not best addressed by dividing people. They're best addressed by sitting down and working things out. And that is why, to take two of the examples referred to in the preamble of this motion, which was most unhelpful to putting it into context, first of all, I am optimistic that we are solving the problem of police being excluded, something I disagreed with from the Pride Parade. We're solving it the Toronto way. We're sitting down, the police and Pride, and they're in the midst of doing it, and I'm absolutely 100% optimistic, based on everything I've heard of those discussions, that that issue will be resolved and that they'll find a way between the two of them to respectfully have police back in Pride. And the second one that was made reference to in the motion was the SRO, the school officer program. And I know some of the deputants will disagree with the fact that I stood there and sat there at the Police Services Board and said I believed not that the program was perfect, but that I supported the program and supported a review of the program because it was 10 years old. And I didn't rely on any particular community organization or activist group to tell me that. I went out to some of our city anti-black racism community consultations and listened to parents and others who said they had some problems with the program and thought we needed to review it. And I supported that review, but I also supported the program because I think it does do good done in the right way. And so this notion that this gets concocted, whether it's me or anybody else around this table, to being that we're not supporting the police, when what we're saying today is we're not supporting a motion that is meant to be divisive, that is a deliberate political stunt, is a complete misstatement of what's actually really going on here. I support the job being done by the police. There's probably no single person in this room that has the opportunity, because I'm the mayor, to tell individual police officers that and to say it to the media more often than I do. But support does not mean that you ignore issues that are confronting this city and its population. Support does not mean that you don't embark upon and carry through with difficult conversations about things that are going to confront us in the most diverse city in the world and in one of the most wonderful cities in the world. Support means dealing with tough issues. That's what you do for your friends. You sit down with them and discuss things that are less than perfect and try and address them. And that's exactly what we are doing with respect to the instances that were referred to in the preamble to the motion, which, as I say, was most unhelpful. The other thing that support doesn't mean is unending escalation of budgets. And I mean, the notion that anybody would say here, as has been said repeatedly by our council colleague, that resources are being taken away when we're allocating $1 billion to policing in the city, is, I think most of the people out there who are paying those bills would find that to be a ridiculous proposition. What we're just doing is asking the police to modernize the way they do things, to make sure that police are where they're needed, when they're needed, and that we start to apply that test to how we invest that money. And that is something that I think the vast majority of people in the City of Toronto strongly support, that we're going to spend the money better, especially when it's a sum that is $1 billion in terms of policing. And you know what? If there are groups out there that are divisive, and I think some of them are, and I think that applies sometimes to Black Lives Matter, two wrongs don't make a right. If they're divisive from time to time, which I would say sometimes they are, then I would say two wrongs don't make a right. And this motion to me was divisive. It was deliberately divisive within the council. It's divisive within the city. It's meant to create divisive feelings inside the population of the city, and that helps absolutely nothing. And to me is inconsistent with the mandate that we are all sent here to do, which is to solve these problems, bring people together, resolve issues, and done, yes, within the context of supporting the police, because we do support our police. We do it in many different ways, all of us as individuals, and the Executive Committee and the Council. And by deferring this motion, referring it, we are not in any way saying anything other than that this was a political stunt and is not the right way to go about addressing serious police issues or about expressing support for the police. So those are my comments, and if there's anybody else who wishes to speak, now's the time. Otherwise, we're ready for the question. And so we have a motion that Councillor Thompson has put. Of course. We'll put it up on the, well, you can't ask for one, but if somebody else wants to. Sure, why not? I mean, no, there's no problem. It's just that you're not a member of the committee, but we'll have a recorded vote. That's super. Okay, so can we just put that motion up on the, pardon me? Oh, so it is in text. All right, so it's a motion to defer indefinitely. Moved by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Oh, it's a recorded vote.
So on the motion, all those in favor, Councillor Balau, Councillor Crawford, Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor McMahon, Mayor Tory, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Shiner, and Councillor Thompson. Twice.
It's carried unanimously.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, we just have a couple of tiny little bits of business to do here before we wrap up. There is number 27.31, which is it's another parking issue, and there was Mr. Barber. Is he still here? I didn't see whether he's still here. He was down to depute on that too, so I guess he's gone. But what we do want to do is I'm going to rule. Where is that note gone? It's right here. I'm going to rule that recommendations 1 and 2 of item 2731 in the letter from Councillor Pasternak were dealt with as part of item 27.11 when we had the discussion about parking earlier on. And so that leaves only the third recommendation, which if you've got it turned up faster than I do, there we are. It only leaves the third recommendation here. City Council requests the Chief Executive Officer, Toronto Transit Commission, to hold public information sessions on the planned partial closure of the Wilson Subway Station parking lot. And so are there any questions of staff on that? Are there is there anyone wishing to speak on that? If not, then we'll simply call the question on this recommendation 3 in item 2731, which is now up on the screen. We're ready for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Is that all the business then, Madam? All right. So speaking of Madam Clerk, may I just say that Jennifer Holks, who's been here, I guess preceding me, how long have you been with the Executive Committee as the clerk? 4.5 years. She has received a promotion to a new position, and we congratulate her on that and thank her for her many years of service, because I would say that the service as a clerk of a committee like this that sits all day and all night is to be taken in dog years, which means 4 times 7. You've been serving 28 years. But having said that, we're most grateful for your service and congratulate you. We'll see you around. Obviously, you're not going anywhere too far away. And Josephine Archbold is going to take over as the clerk of the Executive Committee, and we welcome you and extend our congratulations or condolences, as the case may be. And we'll look forward to seeing you in this chair where you are now in the next meeting. So thank you. Did you hear all that? I didn't. I'd forgotten what it was myself. I just said it. Manager of Legislative Information Standards. So congratulations on that. Thank you for your service. Sorry we couldn't take it right out till 11 o'clock in honor of your last meeting, but we'll save that for you, Josephine, and we'll look forward to that. Any other business? All right. We're adjourned, and thank you very much.